Hey, how's it going, guys? My name is Michael, and I'm back for another reaction video. We're back for another MrBallen video. It's been just a little bit since I've watched him. I always enjoy all of his videos, and they're always really good. I'm trying to get caught up with some of them because he's got so many that I don't think I'll ever catch up, to be honest. But yeah, let's get into this. I always enjoy these
It
stories.
is an unfortunate reality of being human and living on planet Earth that sometimes people go missing without any clue as to what happened to them. One day they're here, the next day they're gone. There's no clear indication of what happened. And despite everybody else's best efforts, nothing is ever learned about what happened to them. And so their families and their friends, they're left with this void in their lives that I can only imagine how terrible that is. There's no
Yeah, it's
closure.
so crazy.
There's like that perpetual sense that if you could just find more information out, you could find out what happened to your loved one, to your friend, to your colleague. But many times, people never get that. These people just go missing and that's it. But in some cases, where people suddenly go
Oh, is this
missing,
gonna be one of
they'll
those ones
turn
where
up
people
again.
get found?
Sometimes days, weeks, months, years later.
Because the last few ones he's been like only a couple people out of all the stories get out, and the rest are either they found dead or they disappear altogether.
In totally different locations from where they went missing. But sometimes, in very rare circumstances, these people that go missing will reemerge days, weeks, months, years later, not having any idea how they got there or what happened to them. And so today I'm going to share three of these reappearance stories. The first two are the most well known, they're very famous. And the third one is not as well known, but equally as intriguing. But before we get into today's three stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that is all I do, and I upload 3 to 4 times a week, if not more. So if that's something you'd be interested in, I would encourage you to please gently perform a lobotomy on the like button and then subscribe to my channel, turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my 3 to 4 weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into the stories.
This is another song. I don't know what it is, but I don't trust it because of that one song that got me essentially copyrighted. Alright, it's called Stephen Kubaki.
In 1978, a 23-year-old named Stephen Kubaki was attending a college called Hope University in Michigan. It was a small Christian school where he was studying German and history. Stephen was a little more free-spirited than the typical student enrolled at Hope University, which was very conservative. He was a big-time outdoor enthusiast and he loved to go skiing. In February of 1978, which was just months before Stephen was set to graduate, he decided he wanted to go on a solo ski trip around the Lake Michigan area. And so
That
this
choice.
area was
Never go
known
solo.
as the Lake Michigan Triangle. It's also known as just the Michigan
Bermuda,
Triangle, and it's
Bermuda
an awful
Triangle?
lot like the Bermuda Triangle, which
Yeah.
is in that northern section of the Atlantic Ocean where planes and boats have gone missing over the years kind of inexplicably. Well, the Michigan Triangle is like that. And starting in the late 1800s, there were all these disappearances that started occurring in the Michigan Triangle area. And so Stephen was going to be skiing around the Lake Michigan area, and so he would be in the Michigan Triangle. Now, he had told his friends and his family that he was just going out for a day trip, and Stephen was a very accomplished outdoorsman, excellent cross-country skier, so
Mm.
really no one bats an eye when he decides to go out and, go skiing. No one even.
It's the same thing with, like, I think climbing has this also sort of thing where you always have a buddy with you. Same thing with scuba diving. You always have a buddy with you. Say you should just always have a buddy with you. If you're going out in the wilderness anywhere where it's water, forest, mountains, you should have a buddy. No matter what. Just always have a second person with you. It's always safer that way.
Even thought twice about it. They're like, all right, cool, we'll see you tomorrow. A day after Stephen had left for this ski trip, some snowmobilers were out in the Michigan Triangle area and they spotted a trail of ski tracks that led up to the edge of the lake, where at the edge of the lake were a set of skis and 2 ski poles. Just stopped abruptly, and they see that this looks like someone might have fallen into the lake. Now, there weren't
Oh.
any clear breaks in the lake itself, but they figured it was worth telling police and to at least let them know in case they're looking for someone who might have gone missing in the area. And so it was around this time that Stephen Kubaki's friends and family started to recognize that he wasn't back yet, and he should have been. And so they end up calling in an official missing persons report because he should have been back. And so the two things happened in tandem. You have the snowmobilers that have found the ski poles and the skis, and you have the missing persons report that's come out for Stephen Kubacki, and immediately they're connected, and this massive search effort is launched with a focus on where those skis and the poles were found. Now, they looked everywhere, but it was like his tracks went right up to the edge of the lake and then just stopped. There weren't any more tracks on the lake. There were no breaks in the lake. There was nothing there. It was like he just suddenly either
Excuse me.
went into the ground or just vanished somehow. And so as hundreds of people have descended on this area to look for Steve Kubacki, his backpack shows up right next to his skis and ski poles. That was the first place that everybody went. And his
Wait, what do you mean it showed up? Just like randomly?
backpack wasn't there. And they didn't really even know how to investigate it. It was just this weird phenomenon where all these people are like, I guess it just must have been there the whole time. They just didn't have a good answer for it. And so after a
Weird.
long and very elaborate search, ultimately they had to call it off. And so they told the family and friends that what must have happened is he got out of his skis and put everything down, went onto the lake, and it cracked and he fell in. And so that's what everybody believed. I mean, why wouldn't they? 15
Yeah, that's what
months go
I
by,
would think.
and Stephen's father hears a knocking on the door. And who's at the door? Stephen Kubacki. And when he sees his son, he can't believe it because he believed his son was dead. But Kubacki has no idea, Steve has no idea how much time has passed. He saw a newspaper. Stephen saw a newspaper in his father's house, and it showed that it had been 15 months since he disappeared. He asked his father, like, how can this be? And he told Stephen, you were near Lake Michigan. That's 700 miles away. How did you get here? And Stephen's like, I woke up in a field about 40 miles from here, and I went to, my aunt's house, your sister's house, and she brought me here. And no one had any idea how he got there or why he was in the field in Pittsfield to begin with. In addition, Stephen had on clothes that he didn't recognize. He had a new backpack that had maps and all sorts of kind of like trinkets from different parts of the country. He had been to apparently San Francisco, Sacramento, all over California, to Chicago, to Utah. He's been all over the country, according to the things that are in his backpack. He had $40 in cash, he had new sneakers, new glasses, and he had a t-shirt on from a Wisconsin marathon. It says he was a participant in. And one of the only things that Stephen would say to the media, because he basically swore off the media and he didn't want to give his story to anybody, he just said to one of the news outlets that he felt like he had been doing a lot of running. But other than that, we don't know what he was doing for 15 months, and apparently he doesn't either.
Wait a minute.
Okay, if you want to be completely cynical about it, in reality, he disappeared on purpose. He traveled around for about a year, did all the things he wanted to do, avoided all his responsibilities, and then when he was coming back, he was like, oh God, I have to explain to people why I've been gone this long. And he's like, oh, I could just make up a story that I don't remember anything. And then all this random stuff, I'll just say I don't know where it came from. That's the only way I could say it, but I don't know. That's such a weird story. I was not expecting him to like actually make it back. I thought he was like gone. There we got Danny Philip.
In
I don't know
early
what that said.
2018, Danny Philippidis was
Oh,
a
Philippidis.
49-year-old firefighter living in Canada. He had a wife, he had 2 kids, he was happy, healthy, successful. And every year, he and his colleagues at the firehouse would go on a ski trip to New York, where they would go skiing at a mountain called Whiteface. And so on February 7th, 2018, Danny and his 7 colleagues are at Whiteface. They're enjoying themselves. Danny was an avid skier. Like, this is something he really looked forward to, was this annual retreat to Whiteface Mountain. And it was getting to be lunchtime, and his 7 colleagues said, hey, let's go down to the lodge and get a bite to eat. Danny was just having a great time on the mountain, and he was like, I'm gonna just do a couple more runs. I'll meet you guys in about 30 minutes or so. I'm gonna do a couple more runs before lunch. So they go down to the lodge, and Danny continues to do a couple more runs. And so after an hour or so, and Danny still hasn't shown up at the lodge, his 7 colleagues have finished eating, and they're like, you know what? I bet Danny just decided he wanted to skip lunch, and he's probably just fine. And so they end up just going out and skiing the rest of the day. But by the end of the night, when the mountain is starting to shut down, they're all checking their phones for messages from Danny. They haven't gotten anything from him. They haven't seen him. They decide, let's go check out, his room back at the hotel and make sure that he's there. Maybe he got sick and he left, something like that. And the resort was attached to the mountain itself. So they just walked right over to his room. They knocked, he didn't answer, but then they went out back and they found his car, and his car was still there. They went to the front desk, they explained the situation. They ended up going in the room and checking to see if he was in there. He wasn't, but all of his personal belongings are still inside of the room. So Danny, who has not shown up after going skiing for this additional run, clearly hasn't left the mountain because his car's still here, his cash, his passport, everything is in his room, but no one knows where Danny is. And so they launched this massive search for Danny. And I mean, this day it was so crowded at Whiteface. There's so many people there. And also, it had snowed a ton before they even started skiing that day. So it would have been very difficult to move very far off the mountain, let's say, if someone wanted to. I mean, just there was too much snow on the ground. So he couldn't have gotten very far. And there were lots of people there that they could interview to say, have you seen this man? They had a picture of him, and no one had seen him. And there was no sign of him. Despite this massive search effort, no one has any idea what happened to him. The authorities call off the search and they tell his loved ones and his friends that, Danny must have succumbed to the elements. That's the only explanation we can give. We can't find him now because the snow's pretty deep. But hopefully when the weather warms up, we'll be able to launch another search and we can recover his body. And so that's the news that's passed to his wife, to his kids, to his friends, and it's just devastating. And then a couple days later, Danny's wife is home, trying to adjust to this awful new normal, and she gets a phone call from a number she doesn't recognize. And she picks it up, and it's a little bit hard to hear, but she immediately recognizes her husband's voice. And she can tell right away that there's something wrong. Like he's not making sense. She's like, Danny, is that you? Is that you? And Danny's like, I don't know where I am. I don't know how I got here. Where are you? What am I doing? And so she immediately tells him, you have to call the police. You have to call the police. They have to come get you. And finally he agrees and he hangs up. The police receive a phone call from Danny, and he doesn't know where he is. He's saying that, my wife told me to call you. I'm very confused. I don't know what's going on. And they ask him to describe where he is. And he starts describing what's around him. And police are able to, eventually pinpoint where he is. And it turns out he was near Sacramento, California, 2,900 miles away from Whiteface Mountain. Even more strangely, when the police go to collect
All right, this one's a
Danny,
bit weirder.
he's still wearing his ski gear. Winter jacket, winter pants, ski boots on. He even still had his goggles on his head. And
It had to have
he
been
has a
car
haircut,
or plane.
fresh haircut, and he has a brand new phone, a brand new iPhone. But he had no money. He had no wallet. He had nothing. He had left all of his belongings in his room. So looking at him.
All right, so the first one, I could see that guy had been, playing some sort of trick or something, but this one seems more real because it was just a couple days. And he wasn't trying to do any kind of like craziness or anything. He just a couple days and he was in a completely different place.
Like, how did you get a new phone? How did you get a haircut? Why did you get a new haircut? And when you got your haircut, why didn't the person cutting your hair let someone know that a man who's visibly confused wearing ski gear is getting a haircut in here? And so it's just this totally strange mystery that Danny, to this day, and anybody that knows Danny and his friends, the investigators, everybody, no one knows how he got there. How does a guy without a car, without any money, wearing ski gear, go from New York to Sacramento, California, somehow get a haircut and buy a new phone, and then just suddenly come to and be like, oh, that's right, I'm Danny, and I'm going to call my wife and let her know where I am now. Like, it was just crazy.
Weird. That one's super weird. I don't have anything for that. Young boy.
So this last story was documented in the official American Ethnology Report from 1897, 1898. Although the story is, well documented in this report, the location is unclear. People have speculated that it's either Ireland, Scotland, or Wales. So just take this with a grain of salt that the location is not known. It's an older story, but it was officially documented in an official report. In 1898, a 12-year-old boy was playing at this river that ran near his house. He was out in the forest, he was playing near this river, and he had a bow and arrow, and he was practicing shooting his bow and arrow. And after a little while, he got bored of his bow and arrow, and he went to the stream itself, and he started to build a little dam in the river to try to catch some fish. And as he's building this thing up, he's down on his knees building up this little dam in the river. He notices someone is walking down the river towards him, and he looks up,
Stranger
and
danger.
he would describe this person as looking normal, a normal looking stranger. It's a gentleman who shows up. He's wearing a nice suit. He walks over to Wofford, and he apparently just came out of the woods. And
What did he just call him?
he walks over to Wofford, and he apparently just came out of the woods. And he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the boy, he's like, "Oh, I'm making this fish trap." And he's like, "Man, that looks like a lot of work. Like, you should take a break." And the boy's like, "Yeah, I guess I could take a break." And the gentleman just says, "Well, if you want, while you're taking this break, you can come to my house. It's just up past the bend here. My family's there. You can have a meal with us, and then you can come back and you can finish your fish trap." And so, this is a different time. This is the late 1800s, and I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
that at the time it was totally cool to go with strangers into.
Don't let him lie. It was cool. Like even in like I don't know the 80s, 70s, it was cool to just randomly go with strangers. I don't know why. I guess that was different time, but man, it definitely was cool to like go with people randomly.
Weird houses in the forest, but the boy felt compelled to say yes. He didn't want to be rude, and maybe his fear of strangers is less extreme than it is, for us today in 2020. And so he agrees to go with the man. They make their way up past the river into the forest a little bit, and they come up to this cabin. Now, the boy played in the woods here, and he had never seen this house before. But he's not too concerned, because as soon as he gets to the house, this cabin in the woods, he sees that the lights are on, and he hears kids playing inside, and a close family friend of his family's is sitting on the porch talking to one of the other apparently family members of the stranger. And so the boy's put at ease, and he says hi to the family friend, and the family friend, waves back. The boy goes inside, and he sees that this family has a couple of kids roughly his age. They're playing, goofing around. They have dinner, they have this wonderful meal, and the boy Wofford is like, "Man, this is so great." And after the meal, he lays down and falls asleep. He kind of loses track of time. The boy falls asleep at this cabin. And so he wakes up early the next morning, and he feels horrible because he didn't mean to fall asleep, and he didn't tell anyone from his family where he was going. And he's thinking, man, they're going to be so worried about me. And so as he's getting up to leave, the stranger is already awake, the one that had met him down by the river and called him up to the house. And the boy says, "Hey, can you walk me down back to the river?" And the stranger's like, "I can take you part of the way down, sure." So the two of them, they're having small talk, and the boy's thanking the man for his generosity. And so as they're walking, they're passing by an orchard on one side and a cornfield on the other. And it's this beautiful morning, the sun's just coming up, and the boy remembers thinking how beautiful the setting was. But he also was thinking, like, I don't even know where I am right now. And I'm assuming he's walking me back to where I live, but this doesn't look familiar at all. And the stranger stops. They get to almost a junction right at the end of the orchard and of the cornfield. And the stranger tells the boy Wofford, he says, "Hey, just go straight. You're going to turn down this way, turn back, and you'll be at the river again, where we met." And the boy thanks the stranger, and the stranger turns and starts walking back towards his cabin and says, "Hey, good luck, see ya." And the boy starts following the man's directions. And Wofford, as he's walking, following the stranger's directions, he's suddenly curious and turns around to look back at this strange person who had brought him up to the house and then now brought him back. And he's stunned because suddenly the orchard and the cornfield are not there. There is no orchard or cornfield. It's just deep, dark forest. And he's like, "What's going on?" He turns back, and there's a search party, or it looks like a search party, running up to him. Part of the search party is the family friend that he had seen at the house. And the boy's like looking at these people running towards him, like they're running to him. And he recognizes the family friend, and he can tell they're like urgently looking for him. And he felt bad because he knows he slept over through the night. So he's like, "Hey, I'm here, I'm here." And they're like, "Where have you been?" And the boy turns to the family friend, and he's like, "Didn't you tell them I was with you?" And the family friend is like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Yeah, the house with the family. We ate dinner together last night." And the guy, the family friend, is like, "I've been looking for you for the past several days. I've been with your family looking for you. You've been gone for 3 days." And the boy is like, "What?"
3 day.
And as he's describing the kind of general vicinity of where this cabin was, he's kind of pointing back up towards where it was and describing it from where the river was. The family says to him that since you've been missing, we've heard rhythmic drumming nonstop coming from the section of the forest that you just described. We could never pinpoint where it was coming from. And now that you just showed up, the drumming has stopped. And so the kid's terrified, but there's no answers. Pretty creepy. So
Bro, that's
three
such a
very
weird
strange
steer.
stories that luckily all of them ended with the person being.
Yeah. I'm actually so happy that that was like one of those like good stories where people all came back. So, yeah, that was good. I enjoyed that a lot. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.